unity.
Sorry.
Good afternoon and warm greetings to all listeners and viewers on this anti-corruption webinar brought to you by the South African Hindu Maha Sabha. My name is Akshay Singh, and I would like to thank all of you. Without further ado, I would like to hand you over to the President of the South African Hindu to get this extremely important discussion underway. Mr. Trikamji.
Thank you, Akshay, and good afternoon to all our viewers and every one of you who've taken the time this afternoon. The interesting webinar debate on anti-corruption. I want to, on behalf of the Maha Sabha and all of you, extend a very warm welcome to Swami from the Chinmaya mission, public Pravin from the University of Witwatersrand, Mr. Nishaan Bolton from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, and of course, Ms. SanushaNaidu from the Institute of Global. Thank you very much for agreeing to participate. I want to again extend a very warm welcome to you as we proceed. Akshay?
Mr. Trikamji. Thank you for setting up more time and go straight to Pujaya Swami Abhedananda, Chinmaya mission in South Africa. He was in of gloriously served and in charge of the activity 2015 highest as country the local mission. Sterling is a society spiritual guidance. Swamiji has nourished not only the hearts of spiritual seekers, but also inspired today looking at all walks of life. In all his interactions, Swamiji engages his audience with unmatched logic, soul-stirring emotion, and a tinge of humor. Message of the Gita and Upanishads, not even at the corporates, universities, management schools, prisons, and drug rehab centers. Swamiji is a versatile speaker and a thought-provoking writer. I now hand you over to Swami Abhedananda.
And grace of God that we all discuss important matter. I'll come straight to that. Ashwin Trikamji, who gave me the opportunity. Then Gordhan ji, thanks for being with us, Professor William. Then SanushaNaidu and Nishaan Bolton. I welcome you all, and let us first of all feel one. For I feel equal. We forget whose word belongs to the God. Therefore, it is fact of life. We try to possess something which is not ours. A certain amount or a certain fate, a certain product, a certain amount of. When a beggar has the right to beg and earn something, we forget this fact that without having anything and we will leave all the money here, all the goods here, the lands here, all the properties here, all the real estate here. So spiritual corruption means that that everything belongs to God. If son and belong, we should not claim anything that is belongs. Nothing belongs to anybody because he has not got exclusively. There are a lot of people around him to earn. Society is there, country is there, nation is there, the friends are there, and therefore all are contributory. And therefore all share what wealth he has. Yes. In pillars, integrity, sensitivity, and chastity, all are linked together. Sensitivity is not there. To whom the whole thing belongs to, then I to occupy something which is not ours also. Belongs to, exclusive to ours, including our own body, including our own son, including our daughter, including our whole family also. Society over it. School teachers have right over it. Therefore, we should not be self going to be a potential danger to the society. For himself. There is only for himself what comes. There a person becomes dangerous, he will be corrupt in future. Spiritual corruption is practiced very, very frequently. I don't know. And therefore I have to work for all. Corruption starts when I take something from all and give. So this appreciation, recognition, that whatever capacities I have, let us think. Right, and now I'm talking to you all. But to also, there are a set of things required which I haven't made. I'm not the product of my own talents and my own education and my own school or my own college. I'm not the product of one thing. There are series of things which, and therefore all are partners to my achievement. All are partners to the money. In spiritual corruption, after that intellectual corruption. Then comes emotional corruption. I don't know which I'll be taking of others. Whether I am in a high position, it belongs to somebody. The inner, the name of the group of the country. The taxpayers it is emotions, and I cannot take somebody else's thing. That money will that particular money I am taking only for myself. How can I take somebody else's money and use it for myself? Stealing has earned the money without. I don't feel identified to the to somebody's sorrows also. When a person stops identifying with somebody's joys and sorrows, he becomes an animal after that. After this emotion, what is the corruption? Money. And this corruption will not go so easily unless we are recognizing the fact. The society, the house, the person is not based on godliness. Whose personality is not based on chastity and integrity and sensitivity. He will come out in the society as the person who trusted upon, who will not be the be banged upon that this person will do the right thing. Because when the ego is blind, ego has very long hairs and no eyes. He doesn't think I'm hurting only him. Nobody can hurt others only. He is hurting himself. Money which has come from the hard-earned persons. Person cannot digest somebody else's money. It will come in his house as various problems and the money will go away. That is not an issue here. Issue is that I should be aware of what I am doing. By this, country will lose its GDP. By this, their job. By this, the father will lose the pension also. This will go down. Slowly, the country hollow. Taxpayers' money is there. People will stop paying taxes also. They are very collapse slowly and steadily. Best education to the youngsters. They'll start leaving the country. The other people will also feel very sure this corruption that comes in our system. How much money I can hold, how much money I can grab, by hook or by crook. And for millions, if I am doing that, it will be very detrimental for me individually. Because that money God will not allow me to digest, because it belongs to somebody else. Society will be deprived of the social needs. The country will be deprived of its various national needs, and ultimately own grave. This seminar should not be confined to 5 people only. That we are discussing how it through which we can penetrate into the people. We should kinds of talks and these kinds of things should be to make them aware of what we are putting into a big problem, country into a big problem. And this is not tough for the bound. If somebody is transgressing the laws. And another issue is there. My point is that today if you see the country, people only, the house is made of bricks also, bricks only. We all as members, as the citizens of the South African community, country, we have to make ourselves aware. This should be there. There should be some kind of awareness program, not for few people, but for everybody in general, so that we take a vow that we have to take the people forward. We have to clean the system. We are ourselves not going to take anybody's money. We're not going to take anybody's property. We will survive on whatever we have. Unless these 4 or 5 levels, I can challenge you, it is not possible to deal with corruption at the money level exclusively. And that is the goal that I think our is aiming at, that we should stand with a common voice. We should all feel the need. There should be a common point. Unless there is South Africa, unless there is a common feeling for the schools of South Africa, for the schools of South Africa, because you forget the big. Unless this big goal, we are not identifying with the whole country. We are not identifying with the God. We are not identifying with the ego. And one who identifies own desires, selfish desires, he is bound to we will perish and we will not allow the country to grow. And therefore, we in this seminar, I will not be there in future. In our this plan to get out of these 5 levels of spiritual corruption, emotional corruption, and then slowly behavior also. Behavioral corruption is also there. Relational corruption is also there. Little we slip one rule, rules. This is why the system collapses. This is why the individual collapses. As an individual also, if you break the rules of ethics and morality in our life, one rule we break, slowly all the... My request is that we all of some formal program so that we can lift the community and we can move forward with a smile on our face. And thank you. Move forward. Not as a human being. Live for God and to bring more the people. A great name, a bigger name. Thank you all very much and Hari Om. Hari Om.
Namaste, listeners. I must apologize. It will be posted on Facebook because I think the content of that discussion was absolutely amazing. When Swamiji has broken down the levels of that we are exposed to, and without too hard, I think task for me. I'd like to move on to our next speaker, Pravin Gordhan. Mr. Gordhan is currently the Mr. Gordhan is currently the Minister of Public the Traditional Affairs and Public Enterprises. South African politics during the height of the struggle against apartheid. He led and organized the student movement and civic structures from the 1970s, and he was in government and spent 4 years in the... Mr. Gordhan was involved in the CODESA multi-party dialogue, participated in drafting the white paper for local government, chairperson of the Parliamentary Constitutional Committee, responsible for the implementation of the 1990. He served as the Deputy Commissioner of the South African Revenue Services, SARS, from 1998 appointed 1999. And yes, he does have the former University of Durban, Westfield. Minister Gordhan, I leave the floor to you.
Good afternoon. Namaste, Sanbuna. Also, he is absent. To the President of the Maha, fellow panelists, and let me firstly for this way because it's and progressive move by the and the world. I just want to make 5 general points, and then we can debate that. The first, of course, is arising from what the Swami said. How do we link spirituality to reality? So when he speaks about integrity, sensitivity, the person, but also in the sense of greed, in practice. And that's a challenge that I think all of us activists or members of an organization like the Hindu Sabha or socially aware South Africans challenge is that the key battle here, if you like, is around corruption. It's around ensuring media diversity. It's ensuring that we don't allow institutional capture as we saw it during the period of state capture, and many other such battles that take place either in the or in societies on various issues that both the poor people and working people are actually confronted with. But it's always interesting to this battles that we have at a, if you like, which is at stake here. Is a war, inverted commas, to ensure that through our activism and through raising the awareness of South Africans in this instance, but people all over the world, how do we ensure that democracy survives? How do we ensure that democracy is not undermined by the various forces at play, which I will outline in. And so, as we learn from many authors, this war or the struggle for democracy and sustaining democratic values and democratic institutions is a struggle that spans every generation and every epoch in human existence. But that same battle teaches us that history is not simply one of advancing from one good stage to another. History has periods of what some authors will call regression. And so you advance and periods of regression. We've experienced in South Africa itself many good years, both during the struggle, but in the post-1994 under President Mandela. And then over the last 10 years or so, we've seen the regression of South African democracy, of institutional decline and capture, in not just a few rands here and there, but billions of rands that are sitting either in South African mattresses or bank accounts, or in various overseas accounts and in tax havens. And that's a lesson for us that, in a sense, generation after generation needs to produce activists who are aware, if you like, of this historical dynamic, who take part in this battle to sustain democracy from one generation. But if we are to sustain it, in each epoch will examine what's really going on in that epoch. What is this corruption that is at the forefront of our minds today in the form of tenders for PPEs or the kind of stealing that happens in state-owned entities or in many other institutions. And there are 5 or 6 things that one should bear in mind. The first is, as I said, for democracy, defined by periods during which there are these efforts to capture terms, in institutional terms, but also in terms of processes. The second is we are confronted by a 1-in-100-year pandemic, and that pandemic causes human misery, as we can see, and many hundreds of thousands of people dying people dying through the pandemic is concerned, rise to all sorts of behavior that our two academic friends, amongst others, should help us to actually understand the guidance that we should all wear masks. Why do young people gather in parties? Distancing. Why do we act? Government is actually trying to provide social behavior. But the pandemic has also given rise, both before it, authoritarian behavior. So today, both world, but also in the developing world, I won't name the countries, you can work that out. You have authoritarian leaders coming up using both the pandemic, but also so-called democratic processes to see and to ensure that select groups of people will benefit, but the vast majority actually suffers under their rule and democratic values under their governance. Let's choose Brazil as one example, but there are many examples closer to home, particularly your webinar at this point in time. The fourth pandemic is that of fundamentalism. Whether it's religious fundamentalism, whether it's racism, which we see generating in all communities in South Africa, but elsewhere as well. And often the racial epithets become to the forefront of one's dialogue, when in fact our constitution says that we should be promoting non-racialism and non-sexism. And the same then applies to the status of women, who also suffer under authoritarian rule, but also the LGBTQI community in various parts of the world as well. So this fundamentalism is what can undermine democracy on the one hand, but give rise to corrupt behavior on the other hand. The next that we see around the world, we were in a multipolar world at one stage, unipolar world at another stage, and today we are creeping towards a bipolar world, and you can see the discourse coming through some of the politics that's going on in the US at the moment, East, which is trying to promote this bipolar. And on the other hand, giving rise to a fairly toxic geopolitics that impacts on trade, that impacts on human relations, also creates corrupt behavior for particularly the elite. The people who've made the most money during this pandemic, when stock markets are supposed to, and people are losing jobs and businesses are closing, in fact, their wealth has grown by 10 or 15 trillion dollars at a time when working people throughout the world, regardless of country, are losing jobs, and small and medium-sized businesses are beginning to be impacted as well. Underpinning all of this is what the Swami was referring to as the key values. That also corruption is greed. Whether we like it or not, greed and consumerism gives rise to a phenomenon which says, I want more and more, and I'm never satisfied. And if I can't earn, then I go and steal the money. But it's also reached a point, as you can see in the media, Porsche today or Ferrari is not enough. I must have half a dozen, and I must have them in different colors as well. One Mercedes-Benz of the highest class is not enough. And then having two brands of cars, where you keep that, I don't know. Assets that have been talked about recently in the media, I hope about this, means that you must stock up on your cars through straight or corrupt means, and invariably it's through corrupt means. The second is the culture of individualism. I care for myself and make sure my pockets are full, and again, it leads to corrupt behavior of all sorts, grand corruption, petty corruption, and undermines the ethic that the Swami sensitivity and a social ethos that takes care of more than just oneself. The other element which he talked about is the ego, and always we have amongst us people who know better than the other, whereas living in a complex age, and corruption is a complex phenomenon, and which is what I'm going to close with in a moment. Because if one sets one ego aside, join in making sure that I secure democracy in the medium term, but more importantly, a fight against every form of corruption in the short term. The last point I want to make is the daily choices we make. The day we bribe a traffic officer, the day we bribe somebody to take a court file out, the day we go to a SARS official and say, take my file, and instead of me paying 20,000 rands, is the day we are also promoting corruption and engaging in corrupt acts. Secondly, as a former so-called taxman, I would obviously raise the question of taxes. Paying tax, keeping, as we know in the community, in some parts we talk about uplangs, so I have to mention that, and not paying one's fair share leads to corrupt practices as well, and ensures that we don't actually pay our. But the flip side of that is that we must refuse to be bullied by anyone when we want to take a stand on these issues. We need to participate in protests like the Orange Mask protests in larger numbers than we're doing. I must congratulate those comrades and colleagues and activists who initiated that, and the Maha Sabha should mobilize UNC together with other religious faiths as well behind the Orange Mask campaign. And lastly, we must continue to produce democratic activists. Activists who is an immediate issue, but also generation to produce its own activists, whatever the issues they pick up, and mobilize activism. A society dies, its spirit dies, its spirituality dies, and ultimately democracy dies as well. South Africa, where all of that is alive. Different and the institutions that they have, different kinds of protest activity, coalitions wherever that is possible in order to fight against corruption. Please support them and join them. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister Gordhan. Always love listening to you, and the fact that you don't hold back any punches. I think everyone listening here really appreciates that aspect of your discussions. And with Swami Gordhan, we would like to take a 5-minute. Slight technical difficulties on the Facebook page, and please, I would urge everyone to be back in 5 minutes and join us live.